Welcome to Word Wizard 3. In this week's video we're going to be looking at how to format your document. So we formatted the words with font and with spacing and with justification and tagging headings and so forth, so we could create a table of contents. But what about the document itself? Now the current document, if you have a look at it, if I just go View, and then if I go and I choose 100%, or I go use the zoom and I go fit, you can see that you can make it fit the screen so that you can see the words a lot closer. And you can set any of these to like 120, so you can kind of zoom in your document, see it a bit further out, see it closer. You can do all of that in View. But what if we want to change the orientation of the document? So instead of having it in portrait orientation, we want to have it landscaped. Or instead of having it from margin to margin, we wanted to put it into columns, such as you might if you were making a brochure or a newsletter or something like that. I'm going to use exactly the same document and kind of work through some of those changes. So all of that is done on the Layout tab. So if I click on Layout, you can see the first option that I have is the margins. And I can have normal margins, I could make the margins narrow, moderate, wide, or I could customize the margins and put in particular values. So you'll notice this one, the normal margins are 1 inch for the top, 1 inch for the left, 1 inch for the bottom, 1 inch for the right. So it's basically an inch all around. And if you look here and you can see in the ruler, you can see where these little tabs are. It shows you where that margin goes and where that margin goes. So you can play with this. If I go narrow, for example, you can see I've narrowed the margins, and that's going to change how much can fit on the page. If I go to moderate, then let's look at the stats. It's 1 inch top and bottom, but 3/4 of an inch for left and right. And so all of these are different options that you have for creating the layout of your document. If you go into custom, then you put in your own for top, bottom, left or right. So let's say I want to make the margins a little bit thicker, like 1.5, and I bring those up to 1 for left and right, and let's bring them all up to 1.5. So I'm having much thicker margins all around. If I click OK, you can see how it's kind of condensed everything on the page, made bigger margins. So you can change the margins. And sometimes this becomes important if you need to fit text into only a certain number of pages. You might want to just narrow the margins ever so slightly. Orientation is whether it's portrait, as you can see now, or landscape. So if I click on landscape, you can see that the page is now, instead of being in portrait format, it's now landscaped. And you might want that for certain documents, particularly if you're putting together a brochure or something like that. Now I'm just going to put this back in portrait. Size gives you the option of changing letter, for example, to A4. So because this computer thinks it's in America, it's chosen letter by default. So if I want to make it print on A4 paper, I can choose A4, and that's going to affect how much fits on a page ever so slightly. You can see my bibliography has gone over a bit. Just one thing to note, even if it's set the size of the page at A4, you can still print it on A5 paper or on A3 paper. You're just setting it up in the document as an A4 size. And you can customize the size if you wish. What about columns? Well, columns is all about whether you have, how many columns you have on the page. So let's say, for example, that after the table of contents, which I want to be on its own, I want the introduction to go into 2 columns. Then I'm going to select the introduction, select columns, and click 2. And you can see what that's done is it's messed everything up. It's just moved that introduction off to one side, and it's put everything. So I couldn't do it by just having the introduction, the columns alone. Again, what we're going to need to do is click on Editing and going to Desktop App. But I just want to use Control Z just to undo that change before carrying on. By the way, what if I did it without selecting any text? So I haven't selected any text. I go to columns and I make 2 columns, and you can see it's done the same thing. I can't do this in the cloud version. It's something I need to go into Editing, open in Desktop App, and I've got to go open up Word and bring it onto the page. Here we go. And let's try and change the columns. So now that we've got it in columns here, we can either go the whole document and go Layout and change columns into 2 columns. And you can see it's done the whole document that way. But this time it hasn't overlapped. It's done it rather nicely. And you can see in your little ruler here, you've got the 2 columns indicated with the gap between them. And you can go and you can set the distance in the columns just by moving these tabs. So if I just move the not that tab there, sorry, the white area. If I just move the white area closer, it's going to move the columns closer together. If I move that white further apart, it's going to make a bigger distance between the 2. Then I'll just go Control Z to get back to where we were. What if I only want it for certain sections? So let's say just the introduction. I just want to put that in columns. I can select it and then put just the introduction into 2 columns. The rest of the document isn't. And I can then go and any section that I want to put into columns, I can select it, and then what if I want 3 columns? Well, I can do it that way. So I can kind of custom make which columns which I put into columns and which I don't. So that's quite a nice little tool. You'll notice under Layout you've also got some other options. For example, breaks, where you put page breaks, where you put next page, odd pages, even pages, and so on. If you want to add line numbers, so I might want to add line numbers. So let's say I select that text there and I choose line numbers, and I can say restart each section, and you can see what it does is it adds line numbers. It begins in this section and it just continues for the rest. So wherever you put a beginning, it will just give line numbers to it. I would suggest that putting line numbers is something you might only want to do if you're setting a comprehension passage and you happen to be a teacher. Hyphenation gives you some options. So for example, you can go automatic, and you'll notice here it's gone after the citation here, it's gone forest, and it's added a little hyphen before the forest. So that's if it's automatic. You can have hyphenation options, and you can say you can automatically, or you can hyphenate words that are in caps, or you can limit consecutive hyphens, so maybe only have 1. So I'm not entirely sure what that does, but just be aware that you can use hyphens and you can have none, which means that it forces words to be kept together. And I would suggest that's probably the best way to do it. This gives you paragraph spacing, which we've done before, and then you've got certain arrange functions. So if you click on selection plane, you can see you've got a selection here, and it's going to show you, if you show all, well, we have none selected, so it's not going to show you anything. Align, are you aligning to the page, are you aligning to the margin? So if I go align to margin or align to page, it doesn't make all that much difference. Use grid lines, so that would set up grid lines that you can see. so that you can get really exact, and you can untick it. All of those are something that I can see here, but I've never really played with, never really used. I don't think they have much effect. If you want to find out what these things do, Google it. But you'll notice that you don't have to use all of these things to be able to have fairly sophisticated document layouts using columns and things like that. We're going to look at indenting especially. And what I want to do for that is to go into a section here where maybe we don't have. To indent, you simply go to the beginning of the paragraph, and if I go tab, then it pushes the indent across. And you can see here, it lines up with that little tab at the top there. And if I drag, let me drag that one to there, and that one there, you can see I've indented the whole paragraph. So top and bottom means the whole paragraph. Just the top one here means that's where the tab goes to, and that's where the words that follow go to. So if I wanted to indent the beginning of each paragraph, I would just go and I would use my tab. And if you want it precisely, you can move it and say, no, I only want it one unit that way. And then that one, just make sure it's the same, set to 1 unit. And you can go that, and you can do that for each paragraph. Just using tab, it's gone a little over 1, so I just readjust back to 1. So you can use those indents as well, and you can control them on the ruler where exactly the indents come. So those are all powerful tools that you can use. Oh, by the way, the indent you notice you can also set for the other end of the paragraph. So you can push any text in, so it takes up the whole margin, or you can push it in so it indents from either the left or the right. You just control it with these little tab marks over there. So that's basically the layout of the document. Oh, there's one more thing. If you go into your design tab, you can see that you've got some other options as well. So from the design tab, you can also do a bit of design on your document. My document's isn't looking pretty. The more you do, the more bad it looks actually. But you can see that you can change the page color. So you can put in colored pages if you wish, and you can also put in page borders if you like. So if you click on page border, you'll notice you can pick a style. So I can use a dotted line, and then I can say that I want, if I put in none, it means there's no border. If I put in a box border, and I put in, for example, the dashes and go OK, you can see it puts little dashes all around my document. And if I go back into page borders, I can kind of change the border styles into a double line, for example. And if I want to hide it, I just simply go back and go none, and it removes. I can add other styles of borders, of course. So I could add a shadow, a 3D custom. You can even, and this is really, really ghastly, put in these borders. Don't. Beginners do that, and it shows that you're a beginner. It really does. For the watermark is simply something you could put like confidential or do not copy or a sample or a draft. So if you want to indicate that an essay is a draft, for example, you can just put in the draft watermark, and then you can remove it by going down and choosing remove watermark. So it can give an indication of the status of a document. If you have to hand in the draft of an essay, for example, put in a draft, and then for your final one you remove that. Okay, I think that's enough on the kind of design and layout front. Again, just play with it a bit, see what the buttons do. Don't be afraid to press and find out. And don't be afraid if you don't know, because there's a lot of these buttons that I don't know how they work. And you saw me pressing some of them trying to find it out in real time. That's how you learn.